This is John the Baptist like you've never seen him. Coming up next, right here on The Right Stuff. Hi, and welcome to The Right Stuff. I'm the Queen, Parker J. Thank you so much for joining me. Today, we are going to be talking to my guest co-host and contributor today, Ryan Gerard. He is the author of the book, The Baptist, a gritty, in-your-face story with a sort of retelling of John the Baptist. Now, you may be thinking, this John the Baptist with a camel hair coat and eating locusts? No, it's not. And we'll tell you about that in just a few moments. As always, I want to thank you for your support. We have been showcasing Christian authors worldwide for the past 10 years. As God gives us grace, we'll continue to do so. To find out how you can help out, simply go to patreon.com/rightstuff. See what you can do. As always, we cover your prayers. To stay up to date with PJC Media, go to pjcmedia.net. Click on the pink follow button. You'll never miss a show. Subscribe to our YouTube channel for updates, uploads, and more. Go ahead, subscribe today. Lastly, I want to thank you all for your support of my newest release, The Redemption Bride. Your response has been absolutely phenomenal. If you haven't had a chance, go ahead and pick it up exclusively on Amazon.com. And so, without further ado, I'm going to bring Ryan on board. Ryan, how you doing?
I'm good, Parker. How are you?
I'm fine, and thank you so much for being with me today.
I'm happy to be here.
Now, I got to tell our listeners, Ryan, we met because of the Facebook algorithm. I was looking at a mutual friend of ours named Chad Petite. I was looking at his page, and he actually mentioned your book, The Baptist. And I was like, oh my gosh, I have to know this guy. I love this cover. I love how gritty it looks. I have to know him. That's how I reached out to you. And then we had a little bit of back and forth, and now we're here. So I love when the Lord uses AI and algorithms to connect people together. Ryan, when you got that message from me, what were you thinking? Like, who's this chick? You know, tell me what you were thinking about.
No, you know what? I'm the same as you. I think it's really cool when stuff like this happens. Like I also met Chad through the same thing. I saw him on Facebook, actually through another guy whose name's Peter Younghusband. He's actually from Australia, and he did a review of my books. And then I also was looking at his page, and he was doing reviews of this other guy, Chad's Pettit's books. And him and I hooked up. I think I just ended up just messaging him. You know, sometimes I just get those moods when you're bold enough to just message somebody and say, see what happens. So I think I just messaged him, and him and I got chatting, and actually, you know, it's pretty cool. I think I can consider calling Chad a friend now. Him and I met through that same thing, and then yeah, you know, it's really cool. So when I saw your thing, it was a pleasant surprise, and I always like when people reach out, and I'm never shy to talk to people online. So this is pretty cool, and I'm really glad that we were able to connect this and get together and do this.
Oh, yeah. And I love Peter Younghusband. I've been knowing him now for a while. He has been on my board of reviewers, too, off and on, bringing certain people to my show that I could interview because he knows what I like. I like a nice eclectic amount of things. So I want to give a shout out to Peter Younghusband and the Chad. I say Petite, but is it Chad Pettit? Because you know how you know someone's name. And then I had him on the show like years ago, and I have to remedy that. So I had him on the show a while ago. But
I don't know. I would pronounce it Pettit, just by the way,
Pettit.
I guess, but
okay.
I could be wrong as well.
So Chad, I mutilated your name, not Ryan. I mutilated your name, but I would love to have back on. But I'm so glad you're here because I want to talk about the state of Christian fiction, not just Christian fiction, but Christian media. I do think it's in a state of flux right now, and we do have to thank The Chosen for giving us a really high caliber show. Now, here's the thing. I haven't seen The Chosen yet, but from everyone, secular and not, who have watched that show, they're like, oh my gosh, this is so good. Do you think a show like The Chosen is helping to turn the tide to give people of faith quality Christian fiction and media?
I think so. I've watched The Chosen. We actually studied it with our youth group, and when it first came out, I got to admit, I was skeptical. I didn't want to watch it because I'm kind of not anti-Christian media, but sort of. Like usually when faith-based or Christian things come out, I'm kind of like, looks cheesy, looks stupid. Just because it's just based on experience, right? Just everything else that I've watched or seen, it just kind of falls short. And I just always found it very cheesy, like the production values and things like that. So I kind of was like, actually my mom was telling, hey, Ryan, you got to watch this show, The Chosen, because it's right up your alley and blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, but I don't want to. it's just going to be another cheesy Christian thing. I don't want to watch it. And I was resistant, but I sat down and watched a couple episodes, and my mind was changed. I was like, you know what, this is different. You can feel like the spirit on it, that this is different. And I think, God's really blessed Dallas Jenkins. And it's cool because Dallas Jenkins is doing what I wanted to do. Like when I was a kid, I wanted to be in the media business. I went to school for film and production and things like that. And I used to make movies with all my buddies, with just me and a video camera and my friends. We would make these little cheesy movies back in the day. And I wanted to grow up to be like in Hollywood or in the movie business somehow, right? And I was going to be the guy who I hated Christian media so much, thought it was cheesy. I was, I'm going to go to Hollywood. I'm going to change it. I'm going to make something better. I'm going to make something cool that's actually watchable. And, I obviously didn't go down that path. My life took a different turn. But, Dallas Jenkins, he's the guy, he's doing what I wanted to do. So I think he's awesome, right? And I love that he does the way he produces his shows and his stuff is, it's actually really down to earth, and he hires good actors, which I think is a number one thing, because, the acting is good, the directing is good, the story is good. It's not cheesy at all. And I was really blown away by it. So I think, yeah. And you know what? I think mainly it's a Christian audience who watches the show. But, that being said, I think it's opened, as he has that studio, Angel Studios. So I think it's opened the groundwork to make more productions and more movies that people would watch, because from The Chosen and the money that he's getting and stuff from it, he's able to branch out and do other things. Where I've seen other movies now by Angel Studios that aren't primarily, because I think primarily The Chosen is if you're honest with yourself, the general public sees, Jesus, I don't want to watch that. But they might want to watch something else that just has a faith-based message that Angel Studios produces, right? So there's the movie called The Shift, which I haven't seen yet, which I heard was pretty cool. But it's not so much of an in-your-face Christian message, but it still has a message. And there's another movie coming out with actually the guy who plays Reacher on the Prime show, and he's doing a movie based on a true life story. It's called, I forget what it's called, but it's about him and his daughter, and he's kind of getting his daughter a transplant. And on the day that the transplant comes in, he gets stuck in a snowstorm and can't get there. So it's a whole story about how the town bands together and and digs out his truck and makes a path for him to get to the hospital. It looks really good, but it has good actors, and it has Hilary Swank and Alan Ritchson. So anyway, it looks awesome. So I think something like The Chosen paves the way for other projects, which I think is cool. And anyways, The Chosen is good, and I think non-Christians could watch it and still enjoy it, but
it speaks to something about the Christian industry, because Hollywood is actually coming back to its roots in doing biblical movies and doing stuff like that, or even just wholesome movies that have really good, high quality acting and storylines. I always think about the Ten Commandments. I used to watch the Ten Commandments as a kid on television, and it came on every year. It didn't matter how many times you saw it. You sat there and watched the Ten Commandments with Yul Brynner and Charles Heston. Even though it wasn't quite biblical, they took a lot of creative license, but it was a good story. And I think one of the reasons why we're talking about this, dear listener, is that we want to encourage you, the listener out there, who has a gift to write and a story in your heart. It doesn't have to be what mainstream Christian media and fiction wants you to be. And what Ryan did with his book, it's called The Baptist. He wrote a gritty story that's speculative in nature. And I want him to tell you a little bit about it. So go ahead and tell us about The Baptist.
Okay, yeah. So The Baptist, it's an idea actually that kind of formed in my head when I was a kid. I was talking about when I was making all those movies and stories and stuff. I had this idea. I had friends who actually would make these comments like, church isn't cool, or I would go to church if whatever, the Bible is, I would read it, but it's just not relevant to me because it's just a bunch of old ancient stuff that happened a long time ago. So and it's historical, and I don't really care about it. So I had this idea that I think obviously maybe God planted in my head from a young age. And the idea was just as simple, well, what if the Bible was relevant? What if the Bible happened in today's setting? What if what are biblical events happened in our day and age instead? How would we then be able to say it's not relevant? Because I think it is. So that was the base idea. Then it formulated into like, okay, what would the main character of this story be? And then it kind of was like, well, John the Baptist would be cool. And then, I kind of just, I forget how, but it formulated into like a plot where John the Baptist was like because in the Bible, John the Baptist is kind of like a nomad living in the wilderness. And he was kind of this extreme guy. So then the idea became like, well, what if John the Baptist was like this guy on the street who was like almost like a vigilante who like saw injustice and stuff and wanted to clean it up. And then so that was like the two like base ideas that came together. And then and then the idea was, well, it has to have time travel, obviously, because it's going to shift time to like bring biblical events forward to our day and age. And there was this whole plot about time travel. So that's what the story's about. Like the main or the basic plot is that it's a retelling of biblical events in a modern age. So like I think it takes place in the not too distant future. So I think it's 2045. Where the main story of the book takes place. And yeah, it follows a guy named John. And he's not necessarily a reincarnation of John the Baptist. His name is he's just John. And he gets a nickname on the streets, the Baptist, because of the way he kind of deals with crime. He's kind of like a Batman, sort of, but more of like a realistic, like Batman. He doesn't dress up in a costume or anything. He just kind of takes care of criminals on the streets. And, the police nickname him the Baptist because he leaves little religious notes on the body, warning people about evil and stuff like that. But then it turns into a plot where by the second book, there's a character who's obviously supposed to be Jesus, but we don't call him Jesus. His name is just the Stranger. He's kind of this mysterious character that he keeps running into. And by the second book, his story comes to full fruition because there's a subplot where, this stranger guy and this other character, they represent, obviously, God and the devil. And the book actually starts off with the two of them meeting and having a discussion, almost like making a bet. Like sometimes we see that in the Bible, even if you think about the story of Job, there's a scene in the beginning of Job where the devil, we see, is on a leash and has to approach God. If he has an idea of how to tempt humans or tempt man or whatever, the Bible shows us that sometimes he has to ask permission, like, hey, God, I want to do this. And God has him on a leash and kind of says, well, okay, I'll allow you to maybe do that and tempt Job in this way. So we kind of see that at the beginning where he asks God, I have a proposition for you. He kind of challenges him and says, if we did this again, if we like battled for the souls of humanity, like good and evil, if we did it again, like they did, when he was crucified and rose again and everything, if we did this again in a modern setting, I don't think this modern world would accept you, that you wouldn't win this time. I think, the way people are today, I would have the upper hand and I would win against you. And he goes, okay. So then they set in motion this time travel plot that brings about the rehappening of the days of Jesus in 2045 in a modern day. So then the second book is, by the time we get there, it's all about, this stranger character, Jesus, and how his ministry from the Bible would have looked in today's day and age. So, like Jerusalem ends up being Washington, D.C. And, the Roman centurions are just like the police. And the Pharisees are senators, like U.S. senators, and things like that. And Bethlehem, being like the crummy town that he was from, is Baltimore in the book. So it's just little things like that. And it's a snapshot, or not more of a snapshot. It's a really broad retelling in a modern day of biblical events. And it follows John the Baptist.
I've heard of people wondering what it would be like to have Jesus in modern times. And I'm glad that we don't know, because so much of our society is based off of Judeo-Christian ethic. I don't think we will even be here because that's how influential the Judeo-Christian ethic is. It gave us the rise of civilization, technology, ethics, philosophy. Lots of these things were risen because of the Judeo-Christian ethic and worldview. And so it's very interesting, but still, it's still fun. It's still like something fun to do. And you do wonder, with our technology, how would Jesus reach out to people? Will he be on a Snapchat, whatever? But I would say he is. I would say he is, because like we were just talking about at the beginning of our broadcast, the algorithms led us to each other. So there you go. And so it lets us know just how the sovereign power of God really does pervade human existence and human reality. Now, you got this story, and I know this is you published this back in 2017, but I'm sure you did a couple of reprints of this story. Was it because your ideas had changed? Was it a grammar thing? You just want to get editing? What was it?
When I wrote The Baptist, I actually wrote it as one giant manuscript, but realized talking to a few people, actually, give a shout out to my friend, Chris. He writes and stuff too. So him and I met, and he told me, he goes, brother, you should make this into a trilogy, because he goes, this is jam packed full of so much content. Like, it is good as a standalone, but if you stripped it apart and made it a trilogy, this would be like awesome. So I really considered it. And I said, yeah. So I actually had to strip apart. There was three like essential acts of the book anyway. So I broke them apart and transformed them into three separate books, which means I had to kind of rewrite the ending for part one so that it made more sense as a standalone. And then there was a bunch of rewrites and edits to make them all each their own standalone book. But it was essentially one story that I peeled apart into three layers. And that actually became cool, because then I could do like three separate parts of the Bible, which I wasn't planning to do before. So part one became all about telling the story of like the Old Testament, and like the days of the judges. If listeners are familiar with the days of the judges, is when the Israelites were struggling to find their place and they didn't have a king. And there's a famous line in Judges that says they, once again they did evil in the eyes of the Lord, and somebody else had to come in and help them, and then they did bad again, and they did good, and they did bad, and they kept on rising and falling, right? And there was like these days of desolation and crime, and sin and stuff was running rampant. So that's kind of what the first book represents, is the time of the Judges of the Old Testament. And then the second book is called A New Testament. And it's all about, the New Testament, when the stranger or this Jesus character has his ministry. And, I won't tell you how it ends, but it ends on a bit of a cliffhanger. And then the third book is about Revelation and the end times. So that's kind of how I played it out. So yeah, it was interesting to write it that way.
So it looks like you just truncated three major parts of the Bible and just have this narrative stretch along the storyline. So it sounds exciting. So dear listener, make sure you go ahead and pick up your copy of The Baptist by Ryan David Gerard. It's available on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. Now, I know this isn't your only work you have. Are you working on something else?
Yeah, so that was my first thing that I did, and it ended up being the trilogy. And I wasn't done, so I had more ideas. I actually had more ideas as I was writing, but I had to wait. I had an idea for a Western story, which is out and published. It's called Wild Men. That one is it's about. I wanted to write a story that had to do with fathers and sons, and I said in the Wild West because this idea kind of in my head about it's being a man now in today's society was different than what it was being a man back in that society, and things with. I just think a lot of times in society, men and the role of a father doesn't get enough attention. So it's just a story that focuses on the role of a father and how important it is to raising a young man. So it's about this little boy who was raised essentially by three different father figures in the Wild West at a time when the Wild West is ending. So the industrial age is breaking in, so the Wild West is over, and it's kind of like there's no need for this cowboy or wild spirit anymore. And it's kind of this idea of like men are being tamed. And it's okay for a man to have a wild spirit. And one of his father figures is a wild man. One of his father figures is like a prim and proper gentleman, and then another one of his father figures is somewhere in the middle. So he has to kind of figure out who he is in that setting. And there's actually a whole story with like a bad guy, and the cowboy has to meet the bad guy, and what's going to play out at the end. But that's what that one's about. And there's another one that's out after that called The Things That Are Not. That's based on the Bible verse in Corinthians, which is actually my favorite Bible verse of all time, where it just talks about how God always uses the underdog to complete his works, right? So that's what that story is about. And it's actually a spiritual warfare kind of story where it's about, angels and demons in the spiritual realm fighting. You mentioned Chad Pettit actually wrote the foreword for that book and helped me edit it. So that one is one of my favorite ones that I've written. It's pretty cool. And then it almost serves as a little bit of a prequel to The Baptist, because it talks about the story behind the human realm, and it talks about the spiritual realm behind that story. And then I'm working on one right now that hasn't quite been published yet. It's almost there, and it's called Born Again. It's actually the first in a series about way in the future where artificial intelligence has kind of taken over, and it's kind of a moral commentary on humanity and what makes a human, and this whole idea that you can create synthetic parts and tissues up in your body. So at what point does a human stop becoming human? The more parts you replace, and it just kind of delves into our humanity and what makes us who we are. And there's obviously a message behind it, but yeah, that's the first one, and there are going to be two more. So that's kind of where I'm at right now with my writing.
It's interesting about the whole AI and what makes a human human. And the reason why that is because being human is actually submitting to the Lord, understanding that we do have dominion over the earth. Now, Ryan also has a podcast. I want you to tell our listeners about that.
So the podcast, you can get it. It's I think pretty much most places where you get podcasts, mainly just Spotify. It's called Close to Something Real. And it just became about, because the same kind of discussion just about Christian media and stuff. And it's me and my old friend from college we went to together, and we just he ended up linking up with each other through social media and stuff. And he actually lives in Ottawa, and I live in Toronto, Canada. So we ended up hooking up and just discussing. And I actually saw that he had a podcast with another friend of mine. So I had the idea, let me talk to this guy and see if he's interested in doing another one with me, and pitch the idea. Let's just talk about Christian media and, all the ins and outs. We'll have an episode where we talk about, the good things about Christian media and what it's good for, and where that serves a place and a purpose, in the family or, as children, things like that. And then where it doesn't quite work, where you're trying to reach people and you're not reaching anybody because most of the Christian media is cheesy and people turn it off within the first 5 minutes because it's just lame. They're like, forget this, and you're not reaching anybody. So we just discuss all about that, and ramifications of is it okay as a Christian, is it okay if I watch a show like Game of Thrones, or am I going to hell because I watched Game of Thrones or something like that? You know what I mean? And it's just a big discussion about that, and it's kind of like I tried really hard to respect everyone's opinions and stuff as well, because and we have an episode where we talk about, if your spirit can't handle watching Game of Thrones without making you want to sin or whatever, then yeah, you probably shouldn't watch it. But there's other people who are comfortable enough to watch it, and it's okay. But taking the judgment piece out of it, where it's like, where in a general sense, as a broad brush, if you are a Christian, you cannot do X, Y, Z or whatever, and all of our media has to be X, Y, Z. It has to be a proper format. And we just kind of reject that belief and understand that, humans are humans. And we kind of try to, with our podcast, try to put humanity back in being a Christian. And, how everyone's experience is different. And it's okay to write, produce, or watch, or whatever, all kinds of media, as long as you're safeguarding your heart in the proper ways and things like that. And yeah, we talk about our writing a little bit too, and, how we reach an audience without becoming too pharisaical or anything like the Pharisees or anything like that. And it's just a fun discussion. Like I said, it's 7 episodes where we just discuss maybe for about half an hour, 40 minutes each time, just the ramifications of Christian media and all the ins and outs of it. So it was fun. It's done now, but it's still available. You listen to it on Spotify, or I think anywhere else you can, Apple Music, anything like that.
And we'll be sure to link it in the show description below. So go ahead and listen to that, because I know a lot of people do have various opinions about Christian media and Christian fiction. And I'm one of the ones who do have a more liberal view about Christian fiction. But I also respect those who do have a more conservative view, just like you said. So really, really glad to see that we have that same connection there. Now, if people want to get in contact with you, where can they find you online?
So a bunch of places. The website for my work is just www.Gerard. Gerard has one R. GerardTheAuthor.com. I'm on social media, Instagram, just Ryan David Gerard, all one word. Facebook, Ryan David Gerard. Twitter, all those places just under Ryan David Gerard. You can look me up under any one of those faucets, and my stuff will be there. So I'd be happy to have you come check out my stuff and follow me. That would be awesome.
In the few moments we have left, I always want to encourage our aspiring authors out there whom God has given the gift to write to pick up the pen and do so.
Yeah. So you know what? Like I said, I started off wanting to be in the movie business, going to school for all this stuff. And obviously, I was working in construction, supporting my wife and two babies at the time. Landed in another job that came across my lap, and I thought, I would have been stupid not to take this job. So I took the job to provide for my family, and my life didn't take the turn I wanted it to take. And a few years went by, but I still had that bug. So that creative bug was still in there, like almost like just the wheels were always turning, and I couldn't get rid of the ideas, as much as I wanted to, maybe. So I think that was just God saying, you got these stories in you, you got to get them out. And it's like, I just want to encourage anybody listening that even though your life might not turn out the way you planned, it rarely ever does. But wherever you are in life and you have that ability or whatever you want to call it to write or express your ideas for him in whatever way, you can do it. I'm still struggling through it. It's been about 10 years of writing, and I've just written my 6th book. So you know what? Just go and do it. And there's no secret. There's no like magic formula. You just got to sit down and do it. You just got to get to the computer and just. Everyone wants to say, "Oh, I'll start writing when I'm ready," or when I'm ready. There's no being ready. Just do it. Just sit down, and even if you write sentences that don't make sense, I promise you, because for me too, once you start writing, it does formulate into something. Because even if I've written stuff and it doesn't make any sense, and then the more you write, though, the more ideas come, and you're like, okay, well, that makes sense if I go back and put it there, and you can always just go back and edit it. So just start writing. Just start doing whatever it is you're going to do, writing. Making a podcast, making a movie, like whatever, just start. And once you start, the process kind of does itself, honestly. It really does. But just start.
Ryan, thank you so much for being with me on the show today. I really enjoyed having you and cannot wait to have you back and have you back real soon.
Yeah, me too. This was great. Thank you.
The Baptist is available on Amazon.com or wherever books are sold. If you'd like to see what his idea, what the biblical narratives will look like in modern times in the near future, go ahead and pick up your copy of The Baptist today. I loved what Ryan said. You just gotta start. If you don't start, you won't finish. And if you don't finish, you won't have a book to even edit. If you don't have a book to even edit, you can't publish. You gotta start somewhere. Don't worry if the sentences come off weird. Don't worry if you can't make sense of what your own writing is. You can always edit it later. So what are you waiting for? Go ahead, pick up the pen, and write stuff. Thank you so much for joining me for this edition of The Right Stuff. I'm the Queen, Parker J., and you have a wonderful, absolutely glorious, blessed day.